Hi everybody, welcome back. In the last video, we looked at some of the evaluation techniques to try to value environmental resources. We looked at market valuation, cost of illness method, replacement cost method, and then a slightly larger and more popular approach would be stated preference methods, so contingent valuation surveys. But then we talked about some of the flaws in contingent valuation surveys. Anytime you're asking people, if you're asking people how much they value things, there are numerous incentives that create the potential for people to lie or for people to exaggerate, or even if it's not related to the person itself, if the survey is not well designed, the survey could be causing problems in the way it's making people think. Anchoring was one of the ones we talked about. But yeah, so in any case, we have some of those flaws in stated preferences. So the last set of techniques that we're going to talk about are these revealed preference methods. These are economic valuation methods based on market behaviors, including travel cost models and hedonic pricing. So these are based on market behaviors, including travel cost methods, and hedonic pricing. Okay, so the whole idea behind these revealed preference techniques are, it may be true that some environmental goods aren't traded in a market, and there's no price per se for clean air or clean water or the value of a tree or a forest, right? But there are market transactions and market decisions that we make based on the environmental goods. And so let's talk about a couple of those. Travel cost method, nice one, pretty intuitive. Essentially, and we'll use the national park for example. People will spend money on market activities related to a natural resource. So for a national park, or to go to a beach, or to go to some fishing or hunting location, I will incur costs, if I value them, to go and see or do or experience that environmental good. So what costs might I incur to go to the national park, for example? Well, could be gas or other transportation costs, like a flight, for example. Gas or other transportation. I may go there and stay for a little bit, so I might have some lodging. There may be entrance fees, and maybe I'll buy some food while I'm on this vacation. All sorts of possibilities there. But the point is, all of these things, they have dollars attached to them, and the only reason that I spent these dollars is because I care about the national park. And so by going to the park, I engaged in market transactions, and we can use those market transactions to get an estimate for how much I am willing to pay or how much I value some environmental good. And like what we talked about in the last video for one of our methods, this is also going to be a lower bound. So, for example, if I spend $300 to visit the Grand Canyon for a weekend, then my maximum willingness to pay is at least $300. Maybe I actually value the Grand Canyon if gas prices were more expensive, and it would have cost me more if the hotel had a higher rate, I would have paid it. But if the hotel only cost me $100, the gas only cost me $100, the fees and food I bought only cost me $100, well, then I only spent $300. But if all of those things would have cost me $400 and I still would have done it, maybe my willingness to pay is equal to $1,200, but I only had to pay $300. So this $300 is a lower bound, meaning my value for the Grand Canyon is at least $300. And then you do this and you look at all the people who went to the Grand Canyon. You get some estimates. A common technique for this sort of valuation technique is, suppose we have the good here in the middle, and let's just say that's a national park. And then you'll have zones. And so for the people who live really close, so you to simplify things, you sit here at the entrance to the national park, and you just ask people when they come in, where do you live? And so some people live here, and here, and here, and here. And basically, within, let's call this zone 1, we can estimate sort of an average cost. So for the people who live within, say, 30 miles of the park, they pay $50 to come. And so then you can come there and you can see how often they come or how many people come. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's keep that in mind. 5 people are willing to pay at least an average of $50. And maybe that's 5,000 or 500 people. Then people who live further away in zone 2, let's say 4 people come from there. And if you live in zone 2, let's say it costs $100 to get there. And if you live in zone 3, it costs $500 to get there. And we only have 1 person. So here we have 4. Let's do another couple. 7 people in zone 1, 4 people in zone 2, 1 person in zone 3. Okay, and then you can, and so at the entrance of the park, you either ask people where they're from. Some people have even used license plates. That's a little problematic due to rental vehicles. But essentially, you ask people where they're from. You have these zones. And what do you have now? You have an average price and a quantity. An average price and a quantity. Average price and a quantity. And what does that give you? Price, quantity. And if the price is really high, like $500, you only had 1 person coming. When the price was lower at 100, you had 4 people coming. And when the price was 50, you had 7 people coming. You have that with multiple zones, and guess what? You connect the dots. What does that give you? It gives you an estimated demand curve from these willingness to pays. And supply curves, like we talked about in the last video, supply is a lot easier to calculate because it's made up of costs. So we know how much it costs to run a national park, or actually it might actually be vertical. But nonetheless, you'll have a supply curve that's much more easily estimated. You can use this travel cost method with the zone technique to get some idea of the demand, an estimate of the demand curve. That's going to give you some equilibrium price. And then guess what? Now you have consumer surplus, you have producer surplus, and you can estimate that total surplus, essentially the economic value of the national park. Okay, and so travel cost method is a really interesting and neat method. if you have time to do it, or you have the money to hire some people to sit out in front of a park or a trail, like if you have your favorite trail in town and you want to get some idea of the value of that trail, go stand at the trailhead for a few hours for, several days over, several weeks, and just ask people, where are you from? Or be a little bit more elaborate and even ask them how much they spent to come, how much they're spending on food, transportation, lodging, so on and so forth. And travel cost method is, a relatively easy exercise. It just takes, time and resources to do it. But yeah, so that's the whole idea behind this travel cost method. Nice thing about this is that, as you can kind of see, it does lead to really nice analysis and really robust results. But these values are often limited only to use value, which we talked about in the first video in this series, the different types of value: use value, non-use value. People, you can only ask people how far they've come to use the resource if they're actually using it. So it's much harder to get the indirect use or the non-use benefits from a survey like this. So again, what we could also say is that this is also going to be a lower bound, because there may be other people still, for example, in the same example with the national park, there may be some person over here, this red dot, they value the national park, but maybe they value it because they have existence value, or they want their kid to be able to go see it one day. But if they don't actually go see it, then we're not going to have their value in the study. So that is one pitfall to travel cost technique, but otherwise it's a very nice, robust technique. Yeah, and it is based on actual behaviors. So I guess I would say these indirect use and non-use benefits, these are a little bit harder to get in a travel cost. They could be a little easier to try to uncover with surveys, stated preferences, but we can try to get a little bit more of these from the last technique, which is hedonic pricing. So let's go ahead and talk about this. Actually, let's talk about this one in the next video. Yeah, so this is going to be the last revealed preference technique we're going to talk about. This is going to round us off for the chapter. Yeah, so anyway, thanks for watching the first example there on travel cost. I'll see you in the next video on hedonic pricing. Thanks.